Welcome, welcome, everybody. Great to see you all. We're going to allow you all to talk because as we get into the presentation, Emily's going to open it up so that it's more of a dialogue. So I am enabling each of you to talk if you would like to say hello or anything before we get started. We're going to wait a couple more minutes, see if some others join us. I'm Gwen Heggie with Body Dynamics. And as you know, you are joining us for our second in a series on identifying and managing emotions with Emily Lawyer, one of our counselors here at Body Dynamics. All right. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Again, thanks for joining us this afternoon. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Emily and let her tell you a little bit more about herself and what we're going to cover this afternoon. So Emily, take it away.
Thanks, Gwen. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time in your day to join us. I'm really excited to be able to hear from everyone and be able to learn together. As Gwen said, this is a valued learning community. And so I'm learning from you just as you're learning from me. So I look forward to this being an interactive time together. As Gwen mentioned, I'm one of the counselors here at Body Dynamics, and we really believe in the holistic model of health, and we are mind, body, and spirit. And so I feel privileged to be able to work at a place that values that. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are going to jump in with part 2 of identifying and managing emotions. Our roadmap for today will be a little bit of review from our last webinar in March. I threw a lot of information at you and a lot has transpired since then. So repeated exposure to new concepts helps to reinforce the stickiness. So we're going to do a little bit of review. And if you weren't able to join us for the last webinar, this will help to catch you up to speed. So we'll do a good amount of review, and then we're going to spend a significant amount of time walking through this process in real time. And we are going to slow things down in that process to really allow us significant and appropriate time to be curious and to explore maybe what's going on in our internal world right now. And as a result, hopefully we will come away feeling better equipped to be able to regulate and manage those emotions. So the last time we met together, we were beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now we are actually starting to emerge from that tunnel. And so we have an amazing opportunity to reset, to keep what serves us and to let go of what doesn't. Yes, we are all experiencing post-traumatic stress. There is also a concept of post-traumatic growth. And what is required for us to be able to do that is naming the elephant in the room. And a lot of times that includes our emotional responses to coming out of this tunnel. My guess is everyone is experiencing a very mixed bag of emotions right now. And so we're going to explore a lot of that. And even just in talking about that will help us to normalize it a bit and allow us to be a little more comfortable with stepping into those emotions. Self-awareness naturally lends itself to self-compassion because it helps to make sense of what I'm experiencing. So we're really going to lean into that concept today, that self-awareness naturally lends itself to self-compassion. Like I mentioned, we'll do some review. Let me go ahead and we'll do some review, and we're going to lean pretty heavily into the second and the third A on this slide, our focused attention and deliberate action. As you can see, we talked about this a little bit in March. Our formula for change is to first start with increased awareness. What are emotions and what role do they play? Focused attention, how am I interacting with my own emotions? And then some deliberate action. What are some tools to grow my skills in practicing that emotional agility? And as Gwen mentioned, because we would like today to be a learning community, we're going to offer liberal use of the chat feature. If you have any questions about what we're practicing or some of the skills or even some of the content, please feel free to put those in the chat and we can try to incorporate those into our practice. All right, let's start with our basics. What exactly are emotions? We know that emotions are biological states generated by neurophysiological changes that let us know a degree of pleasure or displeasure. Life events generate feelings. Emotions simply are. We don't consciously decide what we feel or what we don't feel. It is a reflection of our physiological state at the time. Now, we do get to decide which emotions we attend to. We get to decide which emotions we avoid, and we get to decide how we steward our emotions, which is vitally important because how we steward our emotions can result in harmful consequences to ourselves or to others. But emotions are just a reflection of our state of being at any given moment in time. Emotions are data. They tell us when something needs to be adjusted. They tell us about our wants and needs and how those wants and needs affect our state of being. They're like a control panel in our cars. So in the same way that my radiator gauge in my car tells me that when my car is overheating, I can see that gauge moving. It tells me that my car is overheating and it needs water. Emotions are the same for us. They're just a gauge to tell us where something needs to be adjusted. Emotions also evoke motion. You'll see I've underlined the E there. That's an easy way to remember that emotions evoke motion. They motivate us to do something. And again, what we choose to do, we get to decide how to steward that. Because the way we steward our emotions can result in consequences that are beneficial to us or others, or possibly unhealthy for us or others. One of the easiest ways that we can observe how emotions evoke motion is our fight, flight, freeze response. If there is a speeding train coming down the track and I'm in the way of that train, my brain registers fear and my brain tells me to run. The motion that is evoked from fear is to run. That's a real gift. I don't want to have to think about that. Now, not all emotion and emotional responses are that simple. So let's do a quick review at what's happening in our brains as a result of our emotions. If you were with us last time, you'll remember our friends, the tiger, the hippo, and the owl. 3 parts of our brains that are vitally important in managing and understanding our emotions. So we're going to refer to our amygdala as our tiger. Our hippocampus, we're going to refer to that as our hippo. And our prefrontal cortex, we're going to refer to as our owl, because it's a wise owl, and our prefrontal cortex is the thinking part of our brain. Our tiger, or our amygdala, is the emotional center of our brain. This is where our emotions are the most raw and the most tender. Our tiger's job is to keep us safe. It is the radar for threat in our brains. It's also the trigger for strong emotional responses. So when our tiger is awake and roaring, our hippo, we're going to call our hippocampus our hippo because our hippocampus helps us take in information, like a big wide mouth of a hippo. When our tiger is awake and roaring, our hippo goes underwater and our owl flies away, which means when our tiger is awake and roaring, it's very difficult for us to take in information. And it is biologically impossible for us to access our thinking brain, which means that we can't think very well. This happens automatically. It happens automatically. We get overwhelmed by big emotional intensity, which can shut down our ability to objectively and rationally process what's actually going on. And this happens in any situation where our brain does not feel safe, either physically unsafe or emotionally unsafe. Also, remember from last time, when our tiger tends to wake up a lot, he becomes a very light sleeper. Over the past year, our tigers have been awake nearly all the time, from stimuli where we felt both physically and emotionally unsafe. So once that happens, when we encounter any stimuli that even has a whiff of our past, it could be a sound, something we see, something we smell. Our tiger thinks the same event from our past, the same unsafe event from our past, is happening again in our present. He can't tell the difference between a real danger and a perceived danger. And so our brains move us to carry out the same motion that we did the last time, but only quicker. This is happening all over for us right now, seemingly overnight. Parties are popping up, masks are being ripped off and burned in the streets, restaurants are filling up, baseball stadiums are packed. And while there is joy and celebration in that, our brains, we've been telling our brains for the past 15 months that those things are unsafe. We're now saying, just joking, tiger, it's safe now. Our brains don't really work that way. So if you are feeling mixed emotions around those images that you are seeing and the experiences that you are entering into, that means your tiger is working really well. Your tiger is doing a great job trying to keep you safe. It is completely normal to have hesitation around moving back into some of these environments because, like we said, our tiger has become very accustomed to waking up and looking for threat in those environments. Part of what we're doing today is beginning to help our brains rewire. It's going to give us, what we're going to do today is to give us an experience of putting language to some of the emotions that are involved in moving back into these environments, putting language around these mixed emotions, this complex kind of cocktail of emotions that we're experiencing, and create a plan to choose a different response instead of what has become our automated response. The good news is Our brain's plasticity is marvelous. What gets wired in can also get wired out, but it takes time. And so we are giving ourselves a gift to allow self-compassion during that adjustment. We can say, hey, Tiger, I really appreciate you've kept me safe, and I appreciate you still trying to keep me safe. And then we can decide with self-compassion, hey, I understand what's going on now. Like we said, self-awareness leads to self-compassion. I understand this is just my tiger trying to keep me safe. And with self-compassion, I can now decide what level of interaction feels most comfortable for me at this particular moment. Our tiger and hippo and owl response also involves a complex neurochemical reaction. So let's also do a quick review of what's happening and what has been happening in our bodies when we feel that emotional intensity. Many of us realize that emotional suppression can result in stomach aches, irritable bowel syndrome, headaches, different symptoms in that realm. But studies have also found that when we experience emotional intensity, especially anxiety, fear, and anger, that our muscles become more constricted and we can experience muscle fatigue and inefficiency over time. In traumatic experiences, which at this point we have all been through a collective trauma, the body remembers, it keeps the score. And even after that traumatic event is over or is beginning to end, as we're kind of experiencing, the body can still have difficulty returning to a normal, relaxed state. Our bodies stay in survival mode. Those stress hormones still stay elevated, which instantly releases cortisol, causing an increase in blood pressure and blood sugar, and this can affect our body's immune system. And so even if we think that the event has been put behind us, or maybe there are voices around us telling us, hey, it's time to put this event behind you. If our brains don't feel resolved, especially emotionally resolved, the body clings to those unresolved issues as well. I am hearing many, many reports of unexpected panic attacks right now, unexpected nightmares, and people are confused. You know, they're saying, I don't understand. I went to a party, I came home, I fell asleep fine, and then I woke up in the middle of the night with a panic attack. Shouldn't I be happy? Now we're going back to normal. What is going on? Again, self-compassion comes into play. Based on what we know about how our tiger and our hippo and our owl operate, and how our bodies can still want to stay and need to stay in survival mode, those panic attacks and nightmares, those make total sense right now. It requires time, like we said, requires time to adjust into a new state. And so self-compassion can go a long way. The more we can be curious and accepting of this complex bag of emotions and emotional responses that are involved with adding these elements back into our lives, the more our bodies can find resolution and adjust, and those panic attacks and nightmares will cease. All right, let's pause there just really quickly. Are there any questions or clarifications before we go ahead and move into sort of some more focused attention?
We've unmuted you all so that you should be allowed to talk if you have any questions or would like to engage with Emily.
Oh, no, I did not want to do that. Hang on a second. Sorry, folks, hang on. Try that again. There we go. Okay, we'll keep going. All right. let's spend some focused attention on what it looks like to actually enter into this process. Either we regulate our emotions or our emotions regulate us. It's like we're at the tail end of a whip. So the first step in practicing regulating our emotions, being curious and regulating our emotions, is always to pause. The pause helps to calm our tiger so that our hippo can come out of the water and our owl can come back. Our hippocampus can take in the information that we need to help our tiger recognize, is this a real threat? Is this a perceived threat? And it can allow our objective, rational prefrontal cortex to come back into play. Even talking about these things may have already woken up some of our tigers. So I'd like to start by walking us through a couple of my favorite grounding exercises. And you can practice this in real time wherever you are. The first one is called a 3, 3, and 3. Pretty simple. What you do is you name 3 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, and 3 things you can feel on your body. I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to give you a moment to practice yourself. All right, I can see my script in front of me. I can see a bottle of water next to me, and I can see a box sitting in the room. 3 things I can hear. I can hear my own voice. I can hear the HVAC system. And I just heard my hand hit my other hand. 3 things I can feel on my body. I can feel the chair underneath me. I can feel my toe pushing on the floor. And I can feel my sweater on my neck. All right, take a second and try that wherever you are. 3 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, and 3 things you can feel on your body. Okay, take a quick second and just notice what you're feeling in your body after you've done that. Are you feeling any less tension anywhere? Are you feeling more present? Are you noticing things that you weren't noticing before you did that exercise? Anytime that we do an exercise like that, it allows our brain to come back into the here and now, which can help to calm our tiger and allow our other parts of our brain to come back online as well. Another one of my favorites is just a box breath. Box breaths are used by gurus and Navy SEALs alike, and there's a reason for that. It's extremely effective. Deep breaths are great. They're wonderful. What a box breath incorporates is slow breathing. And slow breathing is actually what helps to calm our tiger even more. So for a box breath, you can, as you're learning, you can actually draw a box with your finger. Once you've practiced it a while, you can just picture yourself drawing a box. But I'm going to also walk us through a box breath as well. I'll explain what we're doing, and then we'll do a couple of them together. Before we do a box breath, do another quick body scan. Take note of maybe where you're feeling some tension in your body. Notice where there's any tightness, maybe in your jaw, your shoulders, your chest. Okay, I'll walk us through and then we'll do a couple together. So for a box breath, you inhale, 2, 3, hold your breath, 2, 3. Exhale through your mouth like you're breathing out through a straw, 2, 3, and then just be still, 2, 3. I'm going to walk us through a couple of those together. Let's inhale, 2, 3, hold your breath, 2, 3, exhale through your mouth, 2, 3, and be still. 2, 3. Let's do one more. Inhale, 2, 3. Hold your breath, 2, 3. Exhale through your mouth, 2, 3. And be still, 2, 3. Great work. Do another body scan. Take note of any difference that you might feel. Take note of the speed of your thoughts and if there's any difference there. A pause allows us to be able to enter into recognizing and naming whatever emotion we're feeling at the time more objectively. And so you've all done a really good job of being able to do that as we move into this next part of the process.
Emily, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
In the box breath, when we're still, are we holding our breath?
You can if you want to. Sometimes for people after they've exhaled, it feels more natural just to kind of be still in that space. If you'd like to hold your breath, you can. Sometimes for people to hold their breath again, it doesn't slow things down quite as much for them. So it can be a personal preference.
Thank you.
Okay, the next step is name it to tame it. By the way, Gwen, can you see the text on the right side of the screen?
We can, yes.
Oh, okay, great. Our next step is name it to tame it. And we are going to use our friend, the feelings wheel, to aid us in that. Whatever we are feeling, the number one need is to name it. A quick review of why. We all tend to use very broad brushstrokes to describe our emotions. Research tells us that the majority of people can only name 3 emotions they regularly feel: happy, sad, and pissed. The problem is that's too amorphous, and our brains and our bodies don't really know what to do with that. But when we can become more specific with our language, it can help us better determine what we need to adjust that panel, like we mentioned with the car gauges. It moves the emotion to the part of the brain where we feel more in control of that emotion. And when we use the feelings wheel to do that, we tend to choose language that we would never come up with on our own, which allows us to fine-tune the process even further. Naming something helps us to find our way through it. It moves the emotional experience from the implicit memory, that part of our brain that is simply raw, tender emotion. It moves it from the implicit to the explicit memory, which can help us feel like we have more control over it. It gives us more agency. Often, we try to control what's outside of us when we feel least able and least equipped to control what's going on inside of us. Naming our emotions is a tremendous tool in our toolbox to give us greater internal control. What helps us accept the things that we cannot control is being able to name our feelings and our emotions about those things. Without the language to describe, communicate, and organize, we're more reactive, like an infant. If you remember, we kind of discussed the example of a baby in our last webinar. If we think of a baby, how does a baby tell us when they have an unmet need? Wailing, rage even. It's the only way a baby knows how to express emotion and steward emotion to get their needs met. This is also why expression of emotion doesn't necessarily help us to resolve the emotion. Otherwise, violence would make our anger go away. And we don't want to react. We want to respond. We want to steward our emotions in a way that allows us to respond. Naming our emotions is an essential part of making that shift. I want to also make an important distinction. It's very nuanced, but it's important. When we are naming emotions, it can be helpful to say, I feel sad, or I feel angry, I feel ashamed, instead of I am sad, I am angry. Otherwise, I begin to internalize the message that I am my emotions. When I can make that distinction, now it's easier for me to recognize I'm no longer owned by the emotion. My emotion is important. It's data for me, but it's just that the emotion is part of me. It does not define my reality. When I'm noticing what my emotions are telling me about my current state, about what I need, and about where I might need adjustments, then I can make the distinction that these emotions are true, but they're not necessarily capital T truth. They're like a wave that moves in, breaks on the shore, and then moves back out. We definitely want our emotions in the car. We just don't always want them in the driver's seat. And so making that small distinction, that small syntax distinction, can help us with that. So as we're practicing, you can be saying to yourself, I feel the particular emotion, instead of I am the particular emotion. Now, the idea is that as we grow and mature, we become more adept at using language to recognize what we're feeling and get our needs met. And truthfully, the problem is hardly any of us are trained how to do that. So I'd like us to start with just some general categories. And if you have any paper nearby or anything that you would like to write some of this down or process it on paper, that could be helpful as well. All right, let's start with some general categories. As you look at the feelings wheel, which emotions do you tend to believe are good or bad? Strong or weak? Acceptable or unacceptable? Positive or negative? And my guess is, as you're just starting this beginning exploratory work, a lot of those labels are emerging. Again, there are positive and negative ways that we can steward our emotions. There are acceptable and unacceptable ways to steward our emotions, but the emotion itself has no attributions. We assign those attributions. Emotions are just data. They're wisdom for us. They tell us when something needs to be adjusted. What emotions were most unaccepted in your family of origin? Which emotions make you the most uncomfortable to witness others feeling? Are there emotions that you tend to judge yourself for feeling? Maybe partially because of some of those attributions that we just went through. Do you find yourself sometimes saying, Well, I'm feeling sad, but I shouldn't be feeling that right now. All right, now that you have a general kind of idea of what attributions might have been assigned to those, let's go ahead and keep going a little further. Look at the wheel and take your time, because there's a lot of them on there. Go ahead and either name to yourself or write them down any feelings that you are aware of right now. Okay, for some of us, this is a confusing step. I don't even know what I'm feeling, Emily. I don't know where to go with that. Remember when we talked about how our body remembers our emotional experiences? Bodily sensations often tell us what we're feeling first before our minds can even register. So it might be easier to explore what you're experiencing in your body right now. Are your muscles tight or relaxed? Is your chest tight or relaxed? Does that mean you're feeling nervous? Or when you feel tightness in your chest, is that your body telling you that you're feeling anxious? Where do you feel yourself holding tension in your body? In your neck or your jaw? Is that where your body tells you that you're feeling anger? Or is that your body's sign that you're feeling anger? Are clenched fists your first sign that you're feeling anything in the anger category? Even sometimes if you're aware of any physical pain in your body, sometimes physical pain functions to tell us that there is still emotional work to be done. And for some of us, if those judgments and what I would call kind of intellectualizing our emotions, if that response is so strong, it may be easier to pay attention first to what your body is telling you instead of trying to have it register through your mind first. Movement is also a way to kind of help emotion get unstuck from our body. So for some of us, it may be easier when we're trying to explore and be curious about what we're feeling to go for a short walk. And aside, anytime our tiger is awake and we perform some sort of repetitive rhythmic motion, that also helps to calm our tiger down. So going for a short walk can help calm our tiger, and it could help to unlock, hey, what is it that I'm feeling right now? And allow some language to come to the surface to be able to name that. Okay, as you're exploring which emotions you are feeling right now, which emotion is the most prominent? When did you become aware of this feeling? What might be triggering this feeling? Remember, if you take a closer look at the feelings wheel, if any of the emotions on the left side of the wheel are ones that are most prominent for you, those are emotions we feel when our needs are not being met. Emotions on the other side of the wheel, feelings when our needs are being met. what is happening or not happening in my daily life that might be a clue about a need that's being met or not met for me. Pay special attention to events that are happening currently for you, relationships, thoughts that seem to run over and over and over on a repeated loop for you. What's happening or not in your daily life right now that might be triggering that feeling? How is my home life? Am I getting along with people in my home life? My children, parents, siblings? Am I enjoying my work? Am I getting along with my coworkers or my boss? As we are being curious about the emotions that we're experiencing right now, are you noticing any themes or patterns in what you're exploring? And what might those themes tell you? Okay, let's jump back into the labels that we might have assigned to certain emotions and explore that a little bit. Notice what tone of voice you're using with yourself as we're being curious with our emotions. Are you judging yourself for feeling any particular emotion? Do you find yourself saying, but I don't have any reason to feel that? Other people have it worse. At least I'm fill in the blank. Remember, life events generate feelings. We don't get to decide what we feel. We get to decide how we steward our emotions, but whatever emotion we are feeling is data for us. It is a reflection of our physiological state at the time. And just like we feel more comfortable opening up to a friend who is safe and compassionate, self-compassion helps us to open up to what emotions we are experiencing. And sometimes even noticing the tone of voice that we're using with ourselves can be a real clue to, am I being judgmental with myself or am I offering some self-compassion? Again, we don't want to either deny our emotions or obey them. We want to accept them. And acceptance doesn't mean I'm resigning to stay in that particular emotional state forever. It just means I'm choosing to live in reality instead of forcing or shaming myself to live in an emotional world where I think I should be. Resisting emotion is what leads to maladaptive behaviors with unwanted consequence. Whatever I resist persists. Resistance of the painful experience of whatever emotion is there actually fuels it, which makes us resist it even more, and then we get stuck in a recurring pattern. And so naming it and being curious in a compassionate way is a great first step in being able to get out of that cycle. Okay, let's keep going. Where or with what emotion is it most difficult for you to be curious? And what's getting in the way? Am I bright-siding myself? I love this term. I just learned it a couple of months ago, but bright-siding ourselves is basically just going to tell myself to stay positive. Now, is it healthy to practice gratitude? Absolutely. There is massive amounts of research that practicing gratitude actually helps to rewire our brain as well. It is a wonderful and very important practice. But if we are doing that to the exclusion of other emotions, to the exclusion of fully exploring and naming and feeling our whole range of emotions, if I'm forcing positivity too soon, I'm self-sabotaging, and I'm actually limiting my capacity to resolve and manage my emotions. I'm not making myself more emotionally resilient. I'm actually making myself more emotionally fragile. Because when I try to limit or cut off my capacity to feel certain emotions, I limit my capacity to feel all emotions. If I tell myself it's not okay to feel sadness or anger, then I'm limiting my capacity to feel joy and love and peace and trust and empowerment. I'm human. I can't cut off one part of myself and not have the other part be limited as well. Notice any internalized messages that might be interfering with your curiosity. In your worldview, is it more acceptable for certain genders to feel certain emotions? In your culture, is it even disrespectful to feel certain emotions? Again, if some of these attributions are getting in the way, that's a good sign that, oh, wow, maybe there are some things that I would like to take a compassionate approach to explore. Now, let me also say, even in the process of just naming it, sometimes that can evoke an emotional intensity, an emotional response that is too large, especially in cases of trauma or particularly painful memories associated with certain emotions. If that is the case, I cannot recommend highly enough to find a good counselor to walk with you, to walk alongside you, so that as you go into those deeper, vulnerable emotions, there is someone who can help you in that continued work. Okay, are you noticing fear associated with any emotion? The emotion of fear associated with other emotions. It's even totally normal to feel fear of happiness. I just saw the other day, there's actually a term for this. It's called Cherophobia, the fear of feeling happiness. Some of you may hear that today and feel set free. Oh my goodness, yes, I have that. Take note of that. Is there fear associated with feeling any particular emotion? Are you noticing any emotions in your worldview that are competing emotions? Are you noticing anger and gratitude, sadness and joy? Again, totally normal. We are a complex species, and to be able to be fully curious about that can help us be able to process and resolve those emotions in an even greater way. Is there a fear that if I feel an emotion, it will never stop? That's a very common hesitation to feeling an emotion. Actually, research tells us the opposite is true. Feelings are not permanent, but what I resist persists. And so resistance of the painful experience actually fuels it, which makes us resist even more. And really, when we believe that we are afraid of feeling a particular emotion because it won't ever stop, what's really actually happening is we are afraid of feeling that emotion alone. And so again, I would say, if that is something that you're recognizing, a good counselor, a trained counselor can help walk you through that in order to be able to feel it, to heal it. Okay, let's continue to explore. We're going to look and see if there's any meaning that is attached to certain emotions for you. When we're emotionally reactive, often we're responding to meaning around the thought. What do I tell myself it means when I feel sad? What do I tell myself it means when I feel angry? Do I tell myself it means I'm weak? Do I tell myself it means I'm a burden on others? Let's try a very specific example. And as you're doing this self-compassionate, curious work, to name some emotions around some situations that probably all of us are experiencing right now. I'd like you to think about some of your expectations about what it would look like, what the reopening after the pandemic would look like. What were your predictions about what it would look like? How did you imagine you would be feeling when we emerge from the pandemic? What emotions did you imagine that you would experience at this point? Okay, any difference from the emotions you're actually feeling? And how are you responding to yourself about that disparity, about that difference? With judgment or with curiosity? And what would it take to offer some self-compassion in that gap? Now that we have identified and named, put some language to our emotion, let's explore what those emotions are telling us. Because as you remember, emotions are data for us. And when we explore what they're telling us, that's one step closer in being able to steward and utilize our emotions well to have our needs met. Let's start with, what do certain emotions usually tell you to do? In other words, what motion is evoked from certain emotions for you? When you experience sadness, does your sadness usually tell you to hide? When you experience fear, does your fear usually tell you to run away? When you experience anger, does your anger usually tell you to yell? When you feel fear, does your fear usually tell you to distract yourself? Or to overfunction, to micromanage, to plan far in advance? I would not be surprised if many of us are really recognizing themes of sadness and anger coming to the surface as we're being curious. We have been hit with a tsunami of grief. And let me just say something quickly about grief. Grief is a gift. Our culture does not do grief very well. Grief is a gift. Grief is like when we eat food, we digest the food and we keep what's good for us, and our body gets rid of what no longer serves us. When we eat food, we metabolize, we digest the food, we metabolize the food to keep what's good for us and let go of what's not. Grief is a way to metabolize loss. It allows us to keep what's good for us, let go of what we don't want to hold on to, and that frees up space for new good things. And so being able to step into the grief is also a really important part of the process. Okay, I'm noticing our time, and I want to make sure I leave some time for questions. Let me say one more thing as I go to this next slide. This might help as we're exploring what our feelings are telling us. How do I know if my emotions have been resolved? When the need has been met, generally the emotion that we're experiencing is going to move to the different side of the wheel. We can also tell when the frequency or the intensity of the duration of the emotion has been mitigated. And as we practice this name it to tame it, and what I resist persists and feel it to heal it, we'll become much more adept at being able to recognize when those are being resolved. Okay, maybe Gwen, we can take a few minutes for questions and comments. Or
Thanks so much, Emily. Once again, those of you that might have joined us late, we have enabled all of you to unmute yourself so that you can talk and ask Emily any questions that you might have. I know I found particularly helpful, Emily, your frequent comments that some of what many of us might be feeling or experiencing was perfectly normal. That was very helpful.
Perfectly normal. And, you know, as we do this kind of work, even just being curious about judgments that I put on emotions, or labels or attributions, or asking ourselves these kinds of questions. Okay, what emotion is most prominent for me right now? What's going on for me? As we do even this kind of work, we increase our window of tolerance to feel that particular emotion. Remember, emotions are like a wave. They come in, they break on the shore, and then they move back out to sea. Research even tells us that most emotions last between 60 and 90 seconds. It feels a lot longer. That also is normal. But naming our emotions gives us an increased window to feel those emotions, which makes us less likely to need to push away or distract ourselves. And bit by bit, our brains start to recognize, hey, I can feel this emotion and still be safe. Our tiger gets a corrective emotional experience. And then we learn, but by being with those sensations from moment to moment and not fighting them, we can learn that they'll arise and they'll pass. And emotional processing is a skill. We learn it, we process, and then we practice compassion when we fall off the bike. It is the bravest work we ever do. And you are all to be commended for showing up to that courageous work. It is the bravest work we ever do.
Well, it looks, Emily, like you might have answered any questions anybody had.
Good.
So once again, we just want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Again, if you have some thoughts, other thoughts, or questions that might come up after you continue to digest and reflect on some of this, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Emily can be reached at Body Dynamics, lawyer@bodydynamicsinc.com. And I know she'd be happy to interact with you if that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So Emily, any other closing remarks?
Oh, there's a couple in the chat. Are there questions there, Gwen?
No, just some thank yous.
Okay.
That was
right.
wonderful.
No. I commend everyone for their courage in stepping into this, because it requires a tremendous amount of humility and curiosity and self-compassion. And you will be served very well by processing and learning that skill of naming my emotion and then asking, hey, what do I need? Do I need connection? Do I need to cry? Do I need to take a break? It's a real gift. It's a real gift that you've given yourself.
So have a wonderful weekend, you all. Thanks again. And Emily, thank you for making the time.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.